"Get him out of that corner. It's just taking up space." The words were muttered by a waiter who thought no one important was listening, and they landed heavier than the clink of cutlery in the near-empty restaurant. An elderly man sat alone by the window, hands folded around a cup that had gone cold. Outside, Christmas lights glowed softly against the dark street. Inside, the silence felt sharper. It was Christmas Eve, and the world seemed to have decided he did not belong in it anymore. The man's name was Arthur Hale. Newspapers once called him a genius. Markets once trembled when he moved his money. Companies rose and fell at the sound of his decisions. He had been a billionaire longer than most of the staff in the room had been alive. And now, on the loneliest night of the year, he sat alone. Unnoticed, unwanted, treated like an inconvenience. Arthur did not react to the words. He rarely did anymore, simply stared out the window, watching families pass by. Wrapped in coats and laughter, carrying gifts and warmth, he could almost remember. The restaurant smelled of roasted meat and pine from a small decorative tree near the door. Soft music played, but it only made the emptiness louder. This had not been the plan for his life, years earlier. Arthur Hale had lived in rooms so large silence echoed even when filled with people. He had built an empire from nothing, working nights, sacrificing weekends, postponing joy. He told himself it would all be worth it later. That later never came. His wife grew tired of waiting. His son grew up without him. Boardrooms replaced birthdays. Deals replaced dinners. By the time Arthur noticed what he had lost, the house was too quiet and the phone too still. Now he lived in a modest apartment he barely used, surrounded by trophies of success that felt like relics from someone else's life. On Christmas Eve, he came to this restaurant every year, not because the food was special, because it was warm, and because being alone in public felt less painful than being alone. At home, he had ordered the cheapest item on the menu out of habit, not need. He always did. It was easier that way. The waiter passed his table again, sighing, already annoyed by the old man who would tip well but take up space. Arthur noticed. He always noticed. Age had sharpened his awareness even as it dulled his voice. He lowered his eyes and waited. The door opened, letting in a burst of cold air and something else. Laughter. Nervous. Hopeful laughter. A man stepped in, holding the door open for a little girl, bundled in a coat far too big for her. Her red scarf dragged slightly on the floor. She looked around with wide eyes, taking in the lights, the decorations, the almost empty tables. Her father brushed snow from his jacket and smiled at her like the world had not broken him yet, even though it clearly had tried. They were late, could tell by the way he checked his phone, by the way he scanned the room with quiet worry. This was not their first choice. This was the last place still open. The hostess hesitated when she saw them. She glanced at the clock, then at the nearly closed section of the restaurant. She started to say something about reservations, about closing soon. The little girl tugged on her father's hand and whispered that it was okay if they couldn't stay. Her voice was small, brave in the way children get when they do not want. To add to a parent's burden, Arthur saw all of it. He watched the man kneel to meet his daughter's eyes. He watched him apologize for things that were not his fault. He watched the girl nod like she understood more than she should. Something inside Arthur shifted, slow and aching, like a door opening that had been locked for years before he could stop himself. Arthur lifted his hand. The motion surprised him as much as it surprised everyone else. The hostess turned. The waiter stopped mid-step. The father looked over, unsure, protective. Arthur's voice came out rough, unused, but clear enough. There was room at his table. The father hesitated. Pride flickered across his face. The instinct to refuse help warred with the desire to give his daughter a warm Christmas Eve. The girl looked at Arthur, her eyes curious, not afraid. She smiled, small and genuine. The kind of smile Arthur realized he had not seen directed at him in years. They walked over. The chair scraped softly as the father pulled it out for his daughter. Arthur noticed how careful he was, how everything he did revolved around making her feel safe. They introduced themselves. The man's name was Daniel. The girl's name was Lily. Daniel explained, almost apologetically, that it was just the two of them. Her mother had passed away the year before. Christmas had been different since. Arthur nodded. He understood different. At first, conversation was polite and light. Lily talked about school, about a paper star she made in class, about how she hoped Santa could still find their small apartment. Arthur listened more than he spoke. He found himself smiling without effort. It felt strange. It felt good. When the food came, Arthur noticed Daniel quietly calculating costs in his head. The habit was familiar. Arthur had once counted every dollar too. Without announcing it, Arthur ordered more. He waved away Daniel's protests with a gentle shake of his head. Tonight was not about keeping score as they ate. Lily asked Arthur why he was alone on Christmas Eve. The question was innocent, but it cut deep. Arthur paused, then told the truth. He said he had worked a lot, said he had forgotten some things that mattered, said sometimes people end up alone not because they want to, but because they wait too long to come back. Lily considered this carefully, then reached across the table and placed her small hand over his. It was warm, real, present. No one should be alone on Christmas, she said, as if stating a simple fact the world had somehow missed. Something inside Arthur broke open. The waiter returned, this time quieter, more respectful. Staff watched from a distance as the table that had once held a lonely old man now glowed with warmth. Laughter rose, soft but real. Other diners glanced over. Drawn to the light they did not realize they were seeking to. When the check came, Daniel reached for it quickly. Arthur placed his hand over it, firm this time. He told Daniel that some gifts are meant to be given, not argued over. Told him that tonight had given him more than any money ever had. Daniel's eyes filled, just slightly. He nodded, accepting. Not charity, but kindness. As they stood to leave, Lily hugged Arthur without asking. It was quick, fierce, and full. Arthur closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of winter and hope and something like home. Outside, snow had begun to fall again. They said goodbye at the door. Daniel thanked Arthur for the meal, for the company, for seeing them. Lily waved until they disappeared down the street. Arthur returned to his table, but it no longer felt like a corner. Later that night, Arthur did something he had not done in years. He went home and picked up the phone. He scrolled through contacts he rarely touched. He stopped at a name he had avoided. His son's. He hesitated. Then he called. The next morning, Christmas Day, Arthur woke to sunlight and a message waiting. It was short, it was cautious, but it was a start. Sometimes the greatest gift does not come wrapped. Sometimes it walks in late, cold, and unsure, and sits down at your table. If this story moved you, comment where you're watching from and who you would invite to your table this Christmas. Subscribe for more stories about unexpected kindness, second chances, and the quiet moments that change everything.